At my birthday party, my 12-year-old daughter grabbed my hand and whispered, "Don't eat the cake." She looked pale. "My mom made me this cake." She was smiling brightly. I listened to my daughter. 17 minutes later, police were knocking on the door. It was one of those moments that made no sense until later, like the background music in a horror film. You don't hear it until the strings start tightening. The cake was pink. Not aggressively pink, just soft and pastel and slightly too perfect. The frosting had those stiff, sugary swirls that always taste a little like chemicals in childhood birthdays. My name was written on it in cursive, Julia. I was turning 35, which sounds like a joke when you say it out loud. 35. You're supposed to have things figured out by now. A skincare routine, emotional boundaries, at the very least the ability to eat your own birthday cake without fear. Apparently not. There were 6 of us around the table. Me, Ryan, my husband, our daughter Zoe, my parents, and my sister Paige. The room was warm. The lights were too bright. Someone had dimmed the overhead bulbs halfway, probably to be festive, but it made everyone look vaguely guilty. "Make a wish," Mom said, holding her phone up, recording me. I blew out the candles and tried not to roll my eyes. If I had a wish, it would be for silence. Just 5 minutes of not being watched, managed, or told how lucky I am as I smiled and sat down again. Zoe reached under the table and took my hand. Her fingers were cold. Then she leaned in and whispered, "Don't eat the cake." She didn't say it like a joke. She didn't say it like a dare. She said it like a warning. And her face, God, her face. Pale, wide-eyed, dead serious. "Zoe," I whispered. She just squeezed my hand harder. The next slice of cake was already being plated and passed. Mom was smiling so brightly it hurt to look at her. "It's vanilla almond," she said cheerfully. "Your favorite." Ryan grinned at me across the table, his fork halfway to his mouth. I did what any rational adult would do. I knocked the fork out of his hand. "Oh, sorry," I said with a laugh that didn't sound anything like a laugh. "Butterfingers." I leaned in just a little. "Don't eat it," I whispered, seriously. Ryan frowned, still holding the fork like it might clarify things if he stared hard enough. He looked down at the cake, then up at me again. "What's—" I stood quickly. "Bathroom." I didn't wait for permission. I grabbed my phone and left the table. Inside the bathroom, I locked the door, pressed my back to it, and tried to think. Zoe wasn't the type to panic. She wasn't dramatic. So what made her say that? I couldn't just walk back out there and pretend everything was fine. But I couldn't exactly start interrogating people in front of the cake either. I needed information quietly. That's when it hit me. She couldn't talk to me out there, but maybe she could text. I pulled up her number and called, not to talk, just to make a plan. She didn't say anything when she picked up. "It's okay," I whispered. "Just text me what's going on, please." A second later, a ping. Zoe. I heard them in the kitchen before they brought out the cake. "Me? Who?" "Zoe. Grandma and Aunt Paige. They're trying to poison us." I stared at the message, not because it sounded crazy, but because it didn't. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, a part of me was already prepared to believe her. Me. "Are you sure, Zeke?" Zoe. "Yes. Don't eat it. I'm serious." That was all. Nothing more. Nothing specific. But it was enough. I didn't know what was in the cake or why, but I knew this wasn't a prank. Zoe wouldn't have said anything if she wasn't absolutely sure, and I trusted her more than anyone at that table. I stood there for a moment, listening to the buzz of the overhead light. I wasn't sure what to do next, but doing nothing wasn't an option. So I smoothed my shirt, unlocked the door, and walked back in like everything was normal. Ryan's cake was still untouched. So was Zoe's. Mine was in front of me, pristine, knife mark clean through the center. Mom looked up as I sat down. "Everything all right?" "Fine," I said. "You haven't eaten your cake." "Neither have you," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "Oh, I can't," she said, tapping her stomach. "You know, sugar and all that." "I'm doing keto," Paige added. Dad shrugged. "Not hungry." It was suddenly too quiet in the room. Ryan gave me a sidelong glance. He was picking up on it now. The edge, the awkward timing, the too perfect frosting. Zoe stared straight ahead, stone-faced. "I think I'm just going to save mine for later," I said. Nobody moved. Nobody ate. 17 minutes later, police were knocking on the door. You know what's funny? It wasn't even the first time someone in my family had offered me something that looked nice on the outside but made me sick. It started when I was 4 and my baby sister was 2. I had this stuffed rabbit. Matted fur, chewed ear, probably disgusting by any adult standard. And one day, Paige toddled over, grabbed it, and wouldn't let go. She wailed when I tried to take it back. Mom told me to let her have it. "She's little. You're the big sister." That was the first time, but not the last. Every toy, every bit of candy, every last cookie, if Paige wanted it, it was hers. I was expected to share, because that's what big sisters do. Except it wasn't really sharing, it was more like ceding territory, over and over. Clothes came next. We were only 2 years apart, close enough that our wardrobes eventually overlapped. I would finally get a new sweater for school pictures, and Paige would whine that she wanted it too. Suddenly it was, "You can both take turns," which meant she wore it that week, and I forgot I even owned it. When we were teenagers, Paige struggled with school, or maybe she just didn't care. Either way, I was the one our parents turned to. "Could you just help her with this essay? She's tired." "Paige needs to pass this math test. Couldn't you just show her how you did it?" The line between helping and doing blurred fast. By sophomore year, I was ghostwriting at least half her English homework. But no one said thank you. It was never a favor, just the natural order of things. She needed. I provided it, like some kind of emotional vending machine. And here's the thing that really screws with your head. If you're trained from toddlerhood to say yes, by the time you're an adult, saying no feels like a crime. Even when the costs are real, even when it comes to money, especially when it comes to money. Because Paige lost her job a year ago. Not her fault, our mom said. The company downsized. She just needed a little help, just for a bit. So I started sending her $200 a month, quietly, every first Friday. It was supposed to be temporary. She was between jobs, but somehow she stayed between them. Mom called it sisterly generosity. Dad said I was just better with finances. Funny how generosity stops feeling generous when it's expected. Then came the cruise. God, the cruise. It was supposed to be this grand family thing, a legacy event, Mom said, for generations. Matching t-shirts, sunset dinners. They'd booked it ages ago, planned group excursions, even set up a shared photo folder online with the caption, "The Big Celebration." I was already going. Me, Ryan, and Zoe. We paid our share, picked our cabin, requested the vegetarian option for Zoe. Done. Paige and her family, not so much. She told everyone she couldn't afford it. She was stressed, worn out, still recovering financially, which, fine, I get it. But then Mom started calling. "She's had such a hard year. She really needs this. You've always looked out for her." It wasn't even subtle. "She's your sister. It's what family does." This time I said no. For the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. I said, "She can go if she can pay for herself, but I'm not covering for her. Not again." There was a pause on the phone, a chilly, weighty pause. Then Mom said, "Well, I suppose that's your decision." And it was. But I could feel the shift immediately, like a fault line cracking open beneath all the polite smiles. Something tight and sour slid into place after that. They didn't argue, didn't protest, just went quiet. Too quiet. After all those years of giving, the toys, the sweaters, the essays, the money, I had finally said no. And they heard it like a betrayal. But I wasn't prepared for what would come next. Because here's the thing, they don't tell you about family. Sometimes they'll forgive everything except you growing a spine. Sometimes they'll love you right up until the moment you stop serving them. And when you finally do, well, let's just say, they find other ways to remind you who's in charge. 17 minutes. That's how long it had been since Zoe whispered, "Don't eat the cake." Long enough for me to warn Ryan. Long enough for my stomach to twist itself into knots. Long enough for my mother to offer more cake, twice. And long enough for me to sit there at the table and pretend not to watch everyone. Then came the knock. Not urgent, just firm, like someone who knocks that way for a living. I opened the door. 2 uniformed officers stood there, one tall and youngish, the other with the kind of calm you only get from dealing with drunk neighbors and divorce threats every night for a decade. "Good evening," the older one said, almost polite. "We received a report and need to ask a few questions, if that's all right." Behind me, the dining room went quiet. I mean, dead quiet. Even the clock felt too loud. "A report?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "It's about something concerning this gathering." He didn't say who reported it, didn't say from where, just enough to freeze the air. I didn't have to guess long. Zoe stood up slowly, 12 years old, chin lifted like she had a badge of her own. "I called," she said. My mom made a sound like someone had thrown cold water on her. Paige actually choked on air. I heard Grandma and Aunt Paige in the kitchen, Zoe said. One of them asked, "Are you sure the cake will work?" The other said, "Yes, they won't be able to go tomorrow." She looked right at the officers. "So, I thought they were trying to poison us." She wasn't dramatic, she wasn't crying, she just said it. Paige stood up so fast her chair scraped. "That is absolutely insane." Mom shook her head, eyes wide. "She's a child, she misheard, she's always been sensitive." "She's 12, Paige snapped, waving a hand like Zoe was some possessed Victorian doll. "She watches crime shows, this is ridiculous." Zoe crossed her arms. "You also said, 'Don't eat the cake.' That's when I knew." Dad mumbled something like, "This is getting out of hand," which, coming from the man who thought cruise insurance was a scam, felt rich. The older officer didn't flinch. He glanced at the cake on the table. "We're going to need to take that with us for testing." "You're joking," Mom said, a bit too loud. "It's standard when something like this is reported," the younger officer said. "Who brought the cake?" "I did," Mom said, hands folded like she was receiving an award. "Vanilla almond sponge with pink frosting. I made it for Julia," she insisted. I muttered. The older officer stepped forward, his tone gentle but firm. "We'll need to collect it." And then, like a switch flipped, Mom's voice changed. It wasn't poison. Just like that, just 3 words. No one moved. "It was just something wild," she added quickly. "Nothing dangerous." I didn't say anything. Didn't even blink. My heart did that thing where it slows down just so it can thud harder. "Mom," Paige said under her breath, warning tone. But Mom kept going, her voice picking up speed like a train she couldn't stop. "It was just something to upset your stomach, so it would have passed. You might have thrown up once, maybe twice, and then you'd feel better by lunch." Ryan stood up slowly. "They'd have stayed home." "That's all," Mom said, hands fluttering now. "It's not like I put arsenic in it. It was harmless, temporary." Paige looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. "This is not happening," she muttered. "She needed the trip," Mom said, turning to me. "You said no. You always say no. You think because you have the money, you can decide who deserves what." I stared at her. "So your solution was to drug us?" "It's not drugging," she snapped. "It's nudging." The officers didn't look amused. The younger one stepped forward. "Thank you for your honesty, ma'am. At this point, we'll need you to remain available for follow-up. That means not leaving town." "We have a cruise in the morning," Mom said, like that changed anything. "You won't be going," the officer replied. "This is now part of an active investigation. If you leave, it could be considered obstruction." Silence, actual thick silence. Paige looked like she'd been hit in the face with a pie. Dad sat down again slowly, like his knees couldn't take it. Mom just blinked at the officer, like she didn't understand the words. Zoe stood beside me, still calm. "You did the right thing," the older officer said to her, voice soft. She nodded once. That was it. They bagged the cake like it was evidence from a crime scene, which I guess it was. A vanilla almond confession dressed in pink frosting. Mom clutched her purse like it might run away. Paige stared at the wall. Dad looked smaller than he ever had before. I didn't feel satisfied, just hollow, like I'd been peeled open and someone forgot to put the lid back on. "They planned for us to stay behind," I said, mostly to myself. Zoe glanced up at me. "They just didn't think it would be like this." We still went the next morning. We zipped up our bags, brushed our teeth in stiff silence, and left the house like we hadn't watched the world tilt sideways 12 hours earlier. My parents weren't coming anymore. The police made sure of that. "Don't leave town," one officer had said, flat. "We'll be in touch." That was the whole send-off. No dramatic goodbyes, no wails from the driveway, no guilt-tripping texts. Just radio silence. The most peaceful thing they'd ever given me. Zoe, of course, was the only one still buzzing with life. She wheeled her little suitcase with the determination of someone heading into battle and declared at breakfast, "I call dibs on the top bunk. Also, if anyone asks, I'm telling them everything." I sipped my coffee and said, "Please don't." Ryan muttered, "Good luck with that." The cruise wasn't massive. This wasn't a royal family-level reunion. It was one of those mid-size, painfully orchestrated bonding trips, just a handful of close and semi-close relatives who still use the word legacy like it belonged outside a will. Aunts, cousins, a few in-laws, 20 people, give or take. Enough for awkward buffet encounters and group photos no one wanted to take. I had no plans to say anything. Not because I believed in keeping the peace, God no, but because I was tired. Too tired to retell a story that still hadn't fully landed in my bones. But Zoe? Zoe was on a mission. We hadn't even unpacked when one of my cousins, a woman named Rachel, I think, someone I used to play Barbies with and hadn't seen in 6 years, cornered us in the hallway. "Hey, where are your parents? Weren't they supposed to be on this trip?" Before I could even open my mouth, Zoe casually said, "They tried to poison us." Rachel blinked. "Sorry, what?" "I'm serious," Zoe added. "They put stuff in the birthday cake so we'd be too sick to go. I heard them say it. I called the police." Then she walked off to go find the pool. Rachel looked at me like I was supposed to laugh. I didn't. That's how it began. No dramatic announcement, just Zoe doing what Zoe does, dropping truth like it's a spoon on the floor. I thought maybe it would blow over, that people would chalk it up to childhood imagination or some exaggerated drama. But Rachel, bless her group chat addiction, apparently told her sister, who told her husband, who mentioned it at dinner. Within 24 hours, the cake story had taken root. I overheard someone near the elevator say, "Wait, that was her birthday with the cake thing?" And by the second evening, I caught my Uncle Mark whispering to his wife, "Well, if it's true, she's got a point. Paige has been freeloading for years." By the third day, someone had the gall to ask me if the cake had tasted weird. "I didn't eat it," I said, obviously. Zoe, sitting next to me, added, "Because I told her not to. You're welcome." She was unfazed, entirely unbothered. And maybe that's what hit me the hardest, as I was bothered. Under the surface of every joke I cracked, every shrug I offered, something ugly and sharp was curling up. I kept replaying it. What if I hadn't listened? What if I'd taken one polite forkful to please my mother? And it wasn't even about the physical reaction. It was the calculation behind it. The idea that someone could look at you, someone who raised you, someone who supposedly loved you, and decide, she doesn't deserve this trip. She needs to be taken out of the picture. Even if it's just for 3 days. Even if it's harmless. I lay awake the third night, the ship swaying gently, Zoe asleep across the room, Ryan scrolling through the headlines on his phone. And I thought, they would have let me sit in that bathroom for 2 days, miss the ship, lose the money, and smile while doing it. Not because they hated me, not even because they were cruel, because they didn't care. They didn't care about what I needed or how I'd feel. They just wanted Paige to go, and I was in the way. There's a word for that. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. Back home, the report came through. I got an email first, a vague notice that the chemical analysis had concluded and that a formal summary was attached. It was sterile, professional, detached in that way only bureaucratic truth can be. They'd found a mild but targeted laxative compound in the frosting, enough to disrupt your system for a couple days. No long-term damage, but definitely enough to knock you off your feet. Intentional. Traced to the specific batch. I stared at the PDF. Then I stared at my hands. Then I closed the laptop and just sat there, still. I didn't cry. That would have felt too neat. I just kept thinking, it was real. It actually happened. My daughter wasn't being dramatic. She was the only one seeing clearly. I didn't call my parents. I didn't email them either, but I did open Facebook. My mother had posted something earlier that day, one of those vague sending prayers during difficult times messages, which barely got a reaction. I uploaded the summary, no commentary, no caption, just the page, highlighted text. Ryan asked if I was sure. "I'm not sure about anything," I said, "but I'm done staying quiet." The comments poured in, not angry, not even outraged, just stunned. People didn't know what to say. I didn't blame them. The next day, Paige texted me a thumbs down emoji. I didn't respond. 2 days later, my bank app reminded me that the monthly transfer to her mortgage fund was due. I deleted the rule. No message, no warning. Just silence. If they noticed, they didn't mention it. I noticed, though. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, the cheap kind, smelled like damp hay. Zoe came in with a half-melted popsicle and plopped down across from me. "You still mad?" "No," I said. "I'm not mad, just disappointed." She snorted. "That's worse." "Yep." She took another bite and added, "You know what's funny? What if they just asked me for help? I probably could have hacked into the booking system and switched the names without all this drama." I looked at her. She was serious. "Zoe," I said, "please never develop criminal skills." "No promises," she said, and wandered off. Ryan came in a minute later. He dried his hands on a towel and nodded at the laptop. "You really posted it." I nodded. They posted their version first. He didn't argue. I took another sip of my tea and stared out the window. Nothing profound. Just streetlights and one raccoon that keeps knocking over our compost bin. We weren't poisoned, not really, but something still broke that day. Maybe it needed to. I didn't feel better yet, but I felt quieter, like I didn't owe anyone an explanation anymore. That I could live with. It didn't go to trial. They pleaded guilty. Well, Mom did. Paige got a lawyer, claimed she knew nothing. Classic. The charge was reckless endangerment. No jail, just probation, a fine, and a record that'll cling harder than they think. They asked to swap the fine for community service, so now Mom volunteers at a church food pantry. Barney is alive and well. They moved soon after to be closer to Paige. The group email said so. No one replied. Zoe still brings it up sometimes. Not because she's scarred, just factual. She has a screenshot of the police report saved in her notes app, just in case. We didn't press charges. The state handled it. That was enough. No, we weren't poisoned. Not technically, but they still tried. And some things, once attempted, don't unattempt themselves. About 9 months later, they showed up. I thought it was a package. It was my parents. Mom had a casserole dish. Dad stood behind her like he'd rather be anywhere else. We wanted to talk, she said. I didn't invite them in, but I didn't slam the door either. We stood there, just standing. She said it was all a mistake, a bad idea, a moment of desperation. Said they missed Zoe, that Paige regretted everything, that we were still family. I said that family doesn't drug each other to win cruise cabins. I said it kindly. I meant it. They stood there a little longer. Then Mom handed me the casserole like that would undo anything. It was tuna. I thanked her, closed the door, put it straight in the trash. We haven't spoken since. It wasn't some big dramatic finale. No slammed doors, no parting speeches, just a quiet, mutual understanding. We're done. What do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough? Comment below and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for the next one.